On the first day of the war, Russian forces took control of a nearby airport, a military airport, leading many people to believe that Kyiv would fall shortly thereafter. But the front lines near that airport outside of Kyiv, while fluid, have not moved considerably in 2 weeks. The Washington Post reports that Ukrainian forces have taken the shrewd approach of retreating to the cities, conserving their weaponry, and focusing on defending their positions in those cities instead of attacking. They've blown up bridges. They've lined the roads into the city with obstacles while still managing to keep corridors open for fleeing civilians. And they say they are ready for any Russian advance that comes their way. Joining us now from Kyiv, Sudarshan Raghavan, correspondent at large for the Washington Post, whom I am happy to announce as of tonight is an MSNBC contributor. Sudarshan, thank you. Welcome to the team. And tell us more about this, because I was just speaking to people, including Richard Engel, who was explaining that this tactic that the Ukrainian army, that none of us would have known or thought would be that strategic or prepared, given their history in that country, has been remarkably effective against a much bigger, much more mighty army.
Great to be with you, Ali. It's and glad to be an MSNBC contributor. So, yeah, I mean, look, everyone expected the Russians to have entered Kyiv by now, but what we're seeing is an unbelievably stiff resistance by the Ukrainian forces, and it is a very smart move. They understand that they don't have the type of the massive weaponry the Russians have. So what instead they're doing is they have retreated back to the cities. They're using guerrilla-style tactics. They've dug trenches in places like Irpin, which is a city just north of on the northern edges of the capital Kyiv, and a key gateway into the city that the Russians are trying to push through. They are inside people's houses. They are in they are behind trees, positioned, camouflaged, and ready for the Ukrainians to come down streets. But at the same time, what they've told me they're being helped by is Russia's own unpreparedness. The Russian soldiers' lack of understanding of the geography of the Ukrainian terrain. There have been examples of Russians running out of food and other supplies, on gas as well. Turning down wrong streets inside Irpin, and then suddenly getting targeted by an anti-tank missile. So yeah, I mean, definitely the Ukrainians are using the smart, and the other thing they're not doing is they're not counterattacking. So there's this one place where I was, one front line a couple of days ago, in which it was shelled by the Russians at least 20 or 25 times during the night, and the Ukrainians told me they didn't reply once because they didn't want to. They wanted to conserve their weaponry, but at the same time they didn't want to turn that front line into a battle zone because civilians were fleeing along that very road. And so when I asked them, what happens if at some point if Russian tanks do come through, then one of the commanders went and grabbed an NLAW anti-tank missile, which was inside a warehouse, and basically said, "We're ready."
Wow. One of the, a lot of the people I'm talking to, particularly these members of parliament who have taken up arms and joined the civilian militias, they are talking about their morale. And the morale has kept that country alive, far larger than U.S. intelligence thought it would survive a Russian onslaught. On the other side, there's an argument that there's a lack of morale for those Russian soldiers who are sort of less clear about why they're fighting, combined with the fact that they're in unfamiliar territory and they're getting into urban warfare with people who know the local terrain.
That's right. You've got to understand that, before the war started, even now, I mean, there's an intense propaganda by the Kremlin, and that's reaching these Russian soldiers. They actually thought at one point that the Ukrainians are going to welcome them with flowers. That's was all over social media. Instead, so they were expecting pretty much of an easy fight coming in. Instead, what they found is a very strong resistance that's not only including the military, but also civilians. They've joined by the thousands to participate in resisting the Russian forces, and they're doing this in many different ways. Many have joined these territorial defense units who are now posted at checkpoints all around Kyiv, as well as in fighting inside Irpin in that area. But but it's more than that. I mean, some of the soldiers in Irpin were telling me that they were actually getting information from civilians wherever there was cell phone network, which is it's scant, but there are some areas where people can still call out of Irpin, and they were giving positions of Russian tanks and artillery so that the Ukrainians can then use their own weaponry to target them. So it's a very cohesive resistance, and it's involving not just the military but civilians as well.